Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the State of Esports Education Industry Panel. I'm your host, Max, also known by T.I. Romeo, and I'm with two amazing guests. We have Chris Lama here, and we have Shoddy, or Professor Zeddy. What do you prefer to be called by right now, Shoddy, for this panel?
You can call Shadi, Professor Zeddy. I'm good for whatever. Yeah, just happy to be here. Prof.
All
yeah, there
right,
you go.
all
Yeah,
right.
just prof.
I'll go ahead and get you guys to both just tell us a little bit about yourself, starting with Chris. If you want to give us a little bit of your background on the state, like esports education, and what your background is in regards to all of that and esports itself.
For sure, yeah. My name is Chris Lama. I go by Lama in the gaming world. I've been in the esports sector for about 9 years now. Started in the grassroots with a team that was previously called Shattered Dreams Esports. Quickly, within a couple of years, turned into Parabellum Esports, which was a professional organization in Rainbow Six and Rocket League, started an iRacing division out in Europe. During that time, I got involved with education and esports through supporting and development of courses for different institutions. Over the last 5 years, I'd say I've been able to teach in different institutions as well. As of last year, or towards the end of last year, I had a year and a half stint running and managing the esports program at Conestoga College. Exited from there in November, and now I am operating an organization, not an organization, a company called A5 Labs. We're still involved with the esports side of things. So we're supporting a school in the Niagara region and building a facility and a program on campus for their students. And then I'm supporting with 2 universities right now in discovering esports through feasibility studies on how to bring esports in a meaningful and sustainable way to campus, to ensure there's actual impact there and that they can do it beyond 2, 3, 5 years, and it could live for a long time on campus. So that's kind of the quick Coles notes on my last 9 years.
And what about you, Shoddy?
Similar timeline in a different way. I started in esports in 2019 as the president of the Wilfrid Laurier esports club. We became the largest student association on campus that year, and then that winter COVID-19 hit, and so I had an opportunity to make some choices in my life, and I pivoted from what I was doing in the world of pre-law to pursuing an esports career. And since then, I've had the opportunity to coach, broadcast, direct, run events, lead partnership strategies and whatnot for a variety of institutions. My first full-time job was working as the varsity administrator for the Keanu Huskies esports program starting in 2022. And then in 2024, I relocated to Calgary to begin teaching esports business management at Bow Valley College. And I've been doing that for about 2.5 years. And as of about a year and a half ago, founded the Alberta Scholastic Esports League, which is a nonprofit organization that runs inter-school competitions for junior high and high school students in the province, right now with a focus on Rocket League, Valorant, and Super Smash Brothers. So I've done quite a bit in the academic space in the Canadian scene for the last 7 or so years.
Amazing. Just to get the viewers to also know you guys a little bit more, what's your favorite esports game or esports organization player? Any of that? What's your favorite games in the realm of esports right now?
I'm a Rocket League guy. That's my game. Team wise, it's always changing, but I think the most skins I have in game right now are Shopify. So I got to stay as a homeboy to Canada. Shopify.
Shout out Landon.
Shout out Landon.
Yeah.
Answer my DMs.
For me, I've been a League player pretty much my whole career in esports. I mean, I started with Dota and then moved to League, so definitely a MOBA gamer. But it'd be League of Legends or some competitive card game. I just love the strategy stuff. And favorite team, I bounce around a bit, but I'd say probably like G2. I think Hansama is one of the best AD carries in the world right now. So
I fully agree with the Hansama.
Can't go wrong with G2 as a choice either. So
getting into the state of esports education, what would you guys say right now are like some of the current ways we're seeing esports incorporated into education, like the big ones right now?
I actually have a model for this, so I'll jump first. When we look at esports in schools, I call it the three C's. You have competition, you have curriculum, and you have community. And so on the varsity side or the competition side, those are your competitive teams, what we would call at the collegiate league or collegiate level, your varsity level programs where schools are competing against other schools. I'm sure many of the audience is already aware of this or probably even participates in this kind of area. Um, funneling off of that, you have your community or your club-based programs, and so this is more the student engagement, student initiative side, where students are hosting events. They're using it to develop career experience. And then lastly, curriculum, where we're starting to see esports academic programs popping up all over the country, not just at the post-secondary level, but even at the high school level now as options or CTF classes or so on and so forth. And so generally, esports can touch just about every facet of your academic life. And in Canada, we're starting to build out all three of those branches. But I'd say definitely our club and community side has been strong for a while. It's the other two branches that I think are still in development right now across the board.
Th- That's a perfect way to sum all of that up. I have no notes. That's
No,
fantastic.
that's totally that was really well covered. The three C's. What do you think students who are looking to get into like esports in like post secondary right now? What do you think they can expect if they're like going into post secondary programs right now? Once they get through those programs, what type of career should they be expecting in that space?
It really depends on what really when you're presenting these programs because there's different schools that are offering different things. If you're looking into more of a media or events focused program, um, or one that has an educational program and a varsity program that most are starting to kind of have both. You'll see different students coming in with different wants and experiences, but the goal, at least that we had previously, was how do we engage each student in every aspect as possible. Originally, we were hiring students to come in as um, like student workers, and they were just a you're going to be a broadcast person, you're going to be a showcaster, you're going to be a you know a operator of the gaming lounge. And what changed over time, and I got to give a shout out to Zach at Conestoga for this, is he changed the model at that school to say let's just make everyone an everything. You want to have you're going to get a shift on managing the gaming floor with the GG Leap software. You're going to get an opportunity to get your hands dirty and mess up as a student. That's the job. Make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, grow from there. You get to showcast if you're comfortable being in front of a camera. Me, I couldn't showcast a game for my life. Maybe I could because I love to talk and I can, yeah, for hours, which is why I love being in the classroom. Um, and you get to learn from that, and then over time you'll start to see who is the strong people or the leaders in that, and then you put them into those positions. Um, on the esports side, the competitive side, generally that's going to be a very niche person who's skilled at the game. But like Shadi said, there's that community aspect too. So how can you engage each student on the community side where they might not be the best player on the team, but they can still get involved with the team, whether it's being a team manager or a player manager or a um I don't know, maybe not a coach, but even some of the best coaches aren't the best players. So it gets a little bit confusing with
Hmm.
all that, but just finding ways to engage different levels of each person in the school and in the program. I think that's how it could work. So I'll let Shadi go on this too.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with the experiential learning components, and I think that's where most of the kind of career trajectory pieces come from. Like most of the people that have graduated from esports programs in Canada and are working in esports in Canada, um, were students that took advantage of experiential learning opportunities on campus. They weren't just like showing up to class and writing their diploma. And so as a teacher in esports, I tell my students this all the time. An esports diploma does not get you a job, but a portfolio might help, right? And so that's where that experiential learning piece is really valuable. When you're talking about specific career outcomes, though, the terminology that we use in the post-secondary space is an LMIS. It's a labor market impact study. And so every school, before they launch any academic program, conducts a labor market impact study to justify or verify the validity of a program that they launch. And so most of the labor market impact studies that have been done in Canada, kind of surrounding esports, have used, we'll say, vague industry stats around revenue growth to justify or legitimize themselves. When we're talking about specific career outcomes, though, the way that translates is entrepreneurial ventures. Really, is what we're graduating students into. Because as I'm sure most of the Twitch viewers are aware, we don't have a ton of esports infrastructure in Canada, and so the justification for these academic programs is training future leaders that can develop those opportunities. And we've seen that with organizations like the gaming stadium, enthusiast gaming, digital sports administration, whatever no matter like how successful these companies are or have been or continue to be, these are examples of esports entrepreneurship in Canada that have kind of helped set the ground floor for the next stage. Incendium. Oh my God, if I keep going, I'm going to be rambling for an hour of all the different groups. But it's entrepreneurship, right? And so that's ultimately what we're training students for, and all of the areas that Chris mentioned and more are opportunities for entrepreneurship in this space.
There's that giant chart that we always talk about that's got all the jobs in esports, but they're
Yeah.
actually job opportunities even outside of the esports world that you're going to find. Some of the strongest students aren't going to land in esports. They're going to land somewhere else too, still have that passion for gaming and esports, which then they could possibly bring to their future roles. But a lot of esports professionals, both players, owners, whatever, are self-made entrepreneurs, and that's a great way to sum all that up for sure.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple different places I want to take this panel after hearing those answers, but I think one of them, and this might just be for a my brain thing, but you're talking about how like getting through the programs, you get good entrepreneurial experience. You're able to set up new opportunities in the esports space. How important do you think esports education is to furthering like the esports market, in the sense that like I come from like a league esports background. So like when we look at like North America in League of Legends esports, they get a lot of flack for like being a lot worse than some of the Asian markets when it comes to like esports. Do you think esports education in North America is something that can help change some of those fields and help repopularize esports in North America?
Yeah, I'm as a league player, I'll jump at this one first. There's a couple different pieces to that question, because part of what you're talking about is market size and market viability. Part of what you're talking about is title interest and trends based off of culture. And then part of what you're talking about is talent pipelines too. And so I think where the academic space can most easily address out of those three issues would be the talent pipeline space. And from that perspective, I would say absolutely there's an opportunity for academic spaces in Canada to address the talent pipeline issue. And I think that's largely what esports programs intend to accomplish. But the reality of esports is that games are products, right? And the companies that own them have specific deliverables and specific objectives. And so when a company like Riot Games makes intentional investments to grow their reach in the Asian markets and continue to expand in Korea and continue to expand in China, as opposed to investing those resources into a market like North America where the uptake isn't as high, sometimes not every game is made for every market, right?
Mhm.
But I would argue that the role of esports in academic spaces is to help better educate business professionals to either identify what those opportunities are for expansion, or to create their own, right? And so that's why oftentimes esports and gaming get blended together into the same pot in Canada, because we look at gaming studios that could potentially lead the next generation of esports. I haven't had the chance to connect with them directly, but for example, here in Alberta, we have the Alberta Esports Strategy, which was a provincial economic development strategy developed by Calgary and Edmonton bodies collectively, to help grow the future of esports. And BioWare is cited as like a major partner or stakeholder in that, and BioWare doesn't even have esports titles, right? So that's kind of where we're at in Canada. And so I would say the role of post-secondary education, or even at the high school level, is to train high quality personnel that can either work for existing organizations and help them expand their offerings, or even just create new products to begin with, right? New games, new genres, so on and so
Mhm.
forth.
I
It's a
really
way to
appreciate that
engage
answer.
the students, and I might be stealing this from a video that I watched of Shadi here this earlier today that everyone should check out. But esports is a way to engage the people who are not engaged in other areas, and this is something I've talked about with the school in the Niagara region that we're working with. Is you've got a high performing sports school, you've got students who are doing or are not going to be necessarily engaged in this. They're coming to the school for specific reasons. It's a private institution, but I can count. Well, we can't count on one hand. We can. There's tons of students that are back in their dorms, that are playing video games, that are not playing sports, that are not engaged in their other school programs. How are we going to attract them to work on other things and build that community that we talked about, and then keep them there and bring them into other programs that, if we can build it through the scholastic side and then into the collegiate side and into the job world, like, it's that pipeline that needs to be developed. And it's a word that I think all of us say often: pipeline, pipeline, pipeline. But it's been kind of built backwards over the last 10 years too, right? It's like the pro sector was built, and then it was this tier 2 scene, which is, and then the tier 3, like, the passionate, driven people who are trying to figure out what they want to do, but they're working their 9 to 5s. Then we had collegiate come in, and now we're seeing a boom in scholastic. There's some struggles in every single level of it, but once we figure out what that pipeline is, it's not necessarily like traditional sports where we're going from scholastic, club, high school, collegiate, pro, or into the workforce. We're kind of, it's like a circle. It's very complicated. There's another image about this that is in some kind of book somewhere. But to come back to the original kind of conversation, we're teaching through esports and through the gaming sector, not necessarily like it's just specific on esports and how to go
Yeah,
pro
yeah.
on esports and things like that.
Mhm.
I love that, like, we need to make sure that people are understanding that we're targeting the people who are passionate about gaming, want to work in the industry or in the adjacent media's industries, and kind of go from there. I hope that makes
Yeah.
sense in
Yeah,
some way.
it's to like kind of recap that it's teaching people how to like get skills you wouldn't get in other fields, but with the motivation through something like esports and the esports industry.
Yeah, you can
Mm.
take a traditional broadcasting program and an esports broadcasting program, and there's a lot of similarities, but it's speaking the language that that person wants to speak,
Hmm.
right? If we can teach them how to broadcast a league game through league versus through traditional medias or sport or whatever it is, it's going to get them interested in this.
Hmm.
And there's still some tangible and relatable experiences from that. So it all
Hmm.
goes back to that other experiential um, programming and whatnot. So
Yeah,
such a
100%.
deep industry.
With that being said, and we're crossing over a lot between like how like an esports program is similar and differentiates from like a sports style program. What are some of the challenges we're seeing with like getting esports programs off the ground right now, especially like in the sense how difficult is it compared to like getting a regular sports program off the ground, and what are some of the challenges you're facing on both like an institutional level and like a financial level with trying to move esports into education?
It's a loaded one.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, let's let the
Yeah.
guy who's doing 2 feasibility studies right now tell us about the feasibility of esports.
This is well, this is loaded. You can read one of our 70 to 100 and something page documents when they're completed. Um, One of the biggest issues I'd say is when you're in the conversation, the early conversation with institutions, is it's one person generally who's a champion of the esports department, either of us three that are on this call, going to our institution and saying, we have a club, we want to build that club up. we need school support, or can we build a facility, or can we get 10 computers for a lab, or all of these different pieces. And of course the school's thinking of it as a business, which most of them do. It is a business at the end of the day. And they're thinking of how much investment is this going to take? Is it worth it? What's the long-term sustainability of it? And how do we go on? I have a feeling, and I'm going to just throw this out there. If any of the three of us went to an institution, or our athletic director, and said, I want to put pickleballs on campus, they would be on it in a second. It's a booming sport. It's all over, whatever. Um, I've had these conversations on traditional sport and on esports, and the way they move on esports has always been faster. On traditional sports has always been faster. Um, I'd say the roadblock and is, at least currently, is there's a lot of news out there on schools that are closing their programs or shrinking their programs, and that immediately sounds alarms to other institutions. And because of what we're doing, I'm going to be a little bit biased and pitch ourselves here, but I don't know how many, and I hope that they have, programs did proper studies on the opportunity of what esports can bring. Use St. Clair as an example. They're an outlier in Canada, obviously. Um, Using other institutions in the US on what they've been able to do, and how can people replicate some of what each institution is doing, because they're all going to want to do it their own way, into a proper, sustainable way. I'm not saying to go build a $10 million esports facility. I'm not going to say build a 5 million or a 2 million, whatever works within the budget. You can make it work, but you have to start somewhere small. And a lot of the schools have clubs. Shadi said one of the biggest community, one of the biggest clubs in Canada? What was your Laurier
Well,
program?
oh yeah, well, it's the biggest
Or
club
on
on
campus.
campus.
On
Yeah,
campus. That's a big
yeah.
school. How many students are at Laurier?
Oh God, 35,000, 40,000. Yeah,
1,000.
yeah.
Yeah, and one of the biggest clubs on campus. So they're there. And during my time, even with Conestoga, is Laurier was the only now Waterloo Region school that didn't have a varsity esports club. Um, Waterloo has one now. Conestoga still has theirs. And Laurier wants to get it done, but they haven't been able to kind of pitch it to their, or sell it, or close that sale to their whoever, directors, presidents, deans, blah 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 blah, all the decision makers. And that's another thing too.
So
Red
yeah,
tape, red tape, red tape. We'll have the conversation, it stops. We'll have the conversation, it stops. We'll have the conversation, it stops. Um, and there's not a lot of student support out there to actually make that happen. But I'm hoping, like, the two of us here are those voices that can change that narrative at the
Mhm.
college or at the university, and make things happen. I still believe that, yes, we've been through some ups and downs and roller coaster, but the next 2 to 3 years, if done properly, the schools who open their new esports programs or start to do it properly with leaders and voices who have done it will be successful and long-term sustainable.
yeah. If I can jump in as well, I think a critical component to this is, and I'll go back to that comment you made about traditional sports versus esports with like pickleball, is that there is still stigma around what esports and gaming looks like in schools, whether that stigma is being outwardly broadcast or not. Like I'd say definitely in terms of like general public perception of esports, I think we're now at a point where gaming is considered a mainstream activity and it's a mainstream hobby. I think parents are coming around to the idea of gaming, and in fact many parents nowadays are gamers themselves. And so socially acceptance for gaming and interest in gaming is high. But when you look at academic spaces, when you look at, for example, the people that are in leadership roles in academic spaces and their understandings of these issues, and some of the research in the space that's talking about the negative impacts of technology on education and whatnot, there's a lot of like there's so much beyond esports that when you're a student you're not really thinking about, because you just see this amazing opportunity and you know how excited you and your peers would be involved in. But like, to put on like the shoes of an administrator for a moment, right? You're not just adding in an esports program, you're adding in a digital technology program for what is seemingly a recreational activity that has a reputation for distracting students from academic priorities, right? And so when you
Mhm.
factor all of these things in, it becomes a lot easier to sympathize with some of the frustrations that schools experience, or some of the roadblocks that they encounter when launching their programs. And so what ends up happening a lot of the times is that when a school does take the leap and they do try esports, they don't get the 3.3 billion year over year figure that they've been hearing over and over in their heads in terms of ROI, like right away, esports was the problem. It wasn't the execution strategy. It wasn't the marketing strategy. It wasn't any of those things. Esports just doesn't work in our school or in our city, or even in our country, right? And so that's the narrative that needs to change. And so I think where we're hopefully starting to see some growth is with those programs that are standing the test of time, is that as programs pop up and disappear, while that creates some discomfort and frustration in the short term, the hope is, can we redirect that attention to schools like St. Clair College that have been alive since 2016 and are still leading at an international level, and try to fight back against some of those narratives a little bit, because clearly esports aren't the problem if they've been able to do it successfully for nearly a decade, right? That
Some of the
that's
top
shorthand.
performing students too are coming out of an esports program, and they're not even studying esports. Like they're on the varsity team or whatever else it is. We did obviously every year you do a survey who's on your esports team and what programs are they coming from. They're coming from IT or computer sciences or other programs, and they're top students. They understand that whole piece, and if we can support with that data, if it's public, I think that helps other schools. So, like ensuring that, as I think you said it earlier, Shadi, like Esports Foundry, they do an annual study. It's what, how many pages? Hundreds of pages or 150 pages long, with all the data that we can use, or students, any student that's listening can use to maybe send that to a AD or whatever program that esports may eventually live under. But we're getting high performing students. We're getting, again, going back to career opportunities in different realms and sectors. We also need to do something within the schools to ensure that we're activating on campus and we're doing things to support the students that are there. I think every school is doing a good job of that. That is, running events, letting students lead events, and doing things like that. So I hope that, again, we can support. I'm sure, my door is open. Shai's door, I'm sure, is open. We want to see more schools get in. We want to see more schools thrive. As much as we say St. Clair, St. Clair, St. Clair, we want somebody to beat them at something in Canada, not just the US. And I say that in a polite way. And I've had the conversation with Sean too. It's like, I want people to come and take us down, because it just drives them to
Yeah.
be better.
I'll,
But they're the North Star right now. So
I'll jump in and say I think one of the cool things in kind of innovation in the academic space that I'm a big fan of, is what Bernard is doing at Humber right now with his students, and looking at those cross-departmental collaborations as well. I think one of the ways that esports can actually make um, an impact for a school administrator is if you're able to connect it to academic outcomes. And I think this is a big reason as to why so many of the programs that exist in Canada, there's like very few schools that have varsity without having an academic program associated, right? Actually, I don't think there's any schools in Canada that have a varsity program without an academic component associated. And so, what they're doing at Humber is they're having students from like the school of like design building merchandise collabs for their esports programs, or they have students that are doing like data and analytics, and they're utilizing public data from their esports arena, like check-in and usage rates, and they're using that to help them with their data management projects. And I think that kind of interdepartmental collaboration is super important to legitimizing esports on campus. It's something that we're looking at doing at Bow Valley right now. I can't say much more at this moment, but we've got some pretty cool things in the health space that are happening that we're trying to like associate ourselves with and latch onto. And so sometimes it's just about finding unique ways to prove that esports has validity beyond the game.
and
It's
each of
it's
those
in,
studies help. So
it's
that's all.
interesting how akin to some of the stuff you're mentioning with like esports programs and like the intersectionality between like how you can get like other programs involved. to like something like a theater or an acting program you see at schools, where it's like in setting up the theater, they're getting all these other programs to help, whether it's design or the art students or the business students on like that lens. And it's interesting to see how like that can motivate a school to do it. I think something I want to touch on, you were mentioning about, like, both of you have kind of touched on it a little bit, but like getting institutions to recognize and want to do esports programs. How can the student body help with that in a way? A lot of our viewers are students, and you were touching on some things, but like if you both have like a message to like the student body out there and how they can help bring esports to their school if it's not already like a big factor, what would you say to those people who want to help get it done but don't know where or how to do it?
Yeah, I'll take this one first, just because Chris introduced the Laurier can of worms, so now I get to talk about my favorite subject.
You said it
Anyway,
earlier. So.
anyway, did I? Oh shoot. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, guess we're here now. Anyways, now people that have known me for a while in esports know that my favorite two topics to talk about are League of Legends and Wilfrid Laurier University. So I'll share the story there, the history there. Just because I think what happened pre-COVID was actually a really good example of that. So as I mentioned, we were the largest student association on campus. The way that happened, though, was pretty incredible. The club had been dead for, I want to say, about 2 years. It was like back in the old days. I feel like an old man when I say this, but TESPA, when TESPA was a thing in the world of collegiate esports, Laurier had a TESPA chapter that was sort of semi-active, and then for whatever reason, kind of started to dissipate. They had this Discord server with like 500 people in it, but nobody was chatting. There were no activities, no events going on. And so when I caught wind of this and I connected with the former leader of the club, they basically handed me the keys to the castle and said, "Knock yourself out." And so that's what I did. I started promoting on like Twitter and Reddit and just letting people know, like, hey, we're doing esports again. We're gonna have these clubs, we're gonna have these teams, and we're gonna compete. I went to club fair. I tried to gather a bunch of interest, and we had 150 students sign up for our club at club fair that day. And overnight became the largest student body on campus. So we went from not existing to being the biggest thing at Laurier. And within 3 weeks of that, I got an email from the athletic department asking if I could join them for a consultation and introducing esports in a more official capacity. Obviously, that fell through, and I won't get into the specifics of that here on this call. But I think the way that you get the attention of your administration is you demonstrate interest publicly and visibly, right? Do it through your students union. Um, Leave feedback on social media. Um, Connect with your student life teams and send emails, and that's what it is. It's social and community pressure is the big first step. I'd say beyond that, if you can then take that and translate that into some value for the institution, now you're not just a club, now you're an organization. And so, if you're one of those clubs that has the ability to host a larger scale event, look at something like UBC, right? Where now the Battle of British Columbia, which of Kevin Deere and Gallant Gaming have been running now for going into their 8th year. That started off as a UBC club initiative, right? That was a club event, and now they're booking up the Vancouver Convention Center. And so I think the tip to students is, don't wait for your institution to build you an esports program. Start building it yourself, and take them along for the ride. It also gives you control of the narrative too, which is oftentimes a little bit better and more impactful than leaving it up to old men that haven't played a video game since the Atari telling you how an esports program should look, right?
Yeah, don't talk about me like that.
Okay. All right. My bad.
Yeah, no, all of that is valid for sure. And then the other thing as part of that, like your data, make sure you're collecting data from events, whether you're going as a club to an event, coming back from that, talking to other institutions and seeing what they're doing. And then, yeah, if you're hosting events on campus, or if you have to host them off campus, which some clubs have to do, which I've seen, we had this many people. Everyone was a student. These are the programs that they're involved with. See where the majority of the students are coming from a specific program too. And I would go to those deans or managers or whatever and be like, our class is active from this school. Would you guys, because esports can live under any branch. It doesn't have to be athletics. It doesn't have to be marketing. It doesn't have to be business or whatever else it is. Some like to be under specifics. Obviously, like could be creative industries, whatever. But whatever fits best, and then building the program around that, or if it turns into varsity or gets that support. And it doesn't have to, just because X school is doing this doesn't
Yeah.
mean number one, the model works, or number two, that's what you need to do.
Right.
You need to
Yeah.
innovate around those other programs. Obviously, the schools want to differentiate so that they can attract students. And it's actually funny that there's less universities involved in the whole piece than it's mostly colleges in Canada that are involved in varsity esports right now.
Well, I'm so happy
There's
you brought that up because I want to
Take it
touch on
away.
that.
Go for it.
So I was gonna say the three schools that pre-immigration changes, and this is important because I know you had a question that we were talking about prior to getting started here. You were gonna ask about some of like the legalese and policy changes. So I'll touch on the
Mhm.
IRCC in a moment. But pre-IRCC, the three schools that were really like dominating esports in Canada were St. Clair, Conestoga, and then Humber was kind of like that third up and rising. And then in Alberta, we had Keano and then Bow Valley kind of popping up as well. I'd say are some of the schools that were making a big impact in that varsity space. All five of those schools are colleges, right? Community college to your colleges. What's really cool about the first three schools that I mentioned to lobby off of Chris's point before I run my own segue is that each one of those schools is organized in a different way, right? Humber is under their it's under their academic stream. It's through their school of media, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Conestoga was well, it was athletics, and then it
Athletics.
became student. Yeah, it was athletics,
So
right?
there's two branches there. One is actually there was three when I started. So it was athletics for varsity specifically.
Right,
There was creative industries, which was the events and media, and there was
right.
a school of business like 1 year
Yeah,
program
yeah,
that was um, more on like the media, social media kind
right.
of side. Those two married. Now they're under creative industries, I think. And then varsity is
Right.
still under athletics, and the hub is still under athletics.
Right. And then you have St.
Complicated.
Clair, which is student union, right? Or there's student life. And so yeah, esports can live anywhere. But part of the reason why it happens to be those 2-year colleges that are driving it is because you have to understand as a student, if you're one of those students that really wants to bring esports to your campus, you have to understand what an institution gets out of having an esports program. So let me let me ask you this, and I'll use my own school as an example, and hopefully no one from my school that's listening to this gets angry at me for saying this. Um, how many of our viewers do you think have heard of McGill University or the University of Waterloo or U of T or UBC or U of A? Okay. Now ask them before I put my sweater on, how many of them have heard of Bow Valley College, right? The reality is that esports is a branding tool a lot of the time for schools. And so it's those small 2-year community colleges that don't necessarily have the same reach or the same impact as larger 4-year universities or master's degree program schools that need that little extra edge to help promote themselves. Like before esports, had you heard of St. Clair? Be honest. Right, and
Nope.
so this is where esports serves a really valuable purpose. I actually teach in my classes. There's a really fascinating article. It's about the history of the NCAA in the United States, and they talk about the history of collegiate rowing. So I actually talk about college rowing in my esports classes. So in 1895, the reason that college rowing became like an organized, formalized interscholastic sport was to grow the brand, support brand building initiatives at the school, to raise alumni donations, and to increase student recruitment. And that's basically true today for most sport programs. There are probably a couple other things you could tack on, but it's basically the same for esports as well. You have an esports program at your school, it's to bring more students to your school, it's to increase alumni support, and it's to help build the school's reputation. And so if you're a student and you're like, how do I bring esports to my school? Ask yourself, how can esports help better support the branding? How can it increase student enrollment? How can it help the school accomplish their goals? Because if your argument for why your school should have an esports program is me and my buddies really like to play Valorant and we want a scholarship, it's not happening. And I'm sorry, like as much as I wish that story was a good sell, it's not. And so that's the other reality to this too, is you have to understand the business behind why schools incorporate new programs. Um, with that business side though means understanding, if you really want to take it to the next level, it's not just understanding what schools need, but it's about understanding what schools are struggling with. And so one of the recent challenges in the Canadian landscape is changes to immigration policy. And I'm blanking on what IRCC fully stands for. I don't know, Chris, if you know the acronym off the top of your head. But effectively, it's like the immigration Council of
Immigration,
Canada.
refugees, and citizenship.
Thank you. That's the one. Yes. And so basically, they set the rules on immigration law in Canada, and that includes things like student visas. Recently, the IRCC made changes that restricted heavily enrollment for international students, particularly at the 2-year college level. So universities were largely unaffected by this, not entirely, but largely unaffected. But at the 2-year college level, you now, in order for an international student to be eligible for postgraduate work, they have to get accepted into a program that has an eligible SIP code, which is basically just a fancy term for it meets a certain labor market outcome. The majority of college programs are not, depending on the school that you're in, do not necessarily meet those SIP codes. And so international student interest in moving to Canada now, unless they're in one of those high key areas where we're trying to fill labor market needs, they're not going to get postgraduate work, which means they can't get PR, which means for most of them, there's no need or reason to come to Canada. And so you have schools like, well, I won't name names. You have some schools that had a very large student population of international students that now have just lost a major revenue line for next year. So you're coming to your school and you're saying, please give me scholarship money for esports when they're suffering a $50 million deficit going into 2027, right? That's not going to work. So one of the things that I try to encourage people to do when they're looking at founding a new esports program is, can you, especially right now, like if you want to start an esports program in 2026 in Canada, go to your administration and prove to them how you can increase domestic student enrollment through your esports program. If you can build a convincing business pitch, like a business case to do that, you are speaking the language that administrators want to hear, because every administrator in the country right now is trying to figure out, how do I increase domestic student enrollment? Okay. I know that this is what nobody was thinking when they tuned into a panel on esports education. They're like, how do I get esports at my schools? I thought I just had to have a really good League of Legends roster. No, you need to figure out how to solve a money problem, an immigration problem. You have to become an expert in immigration to run an esports program in Canada in 2026. So this is the state of our world, man. It's weird. It's a weird time.
Perfectly said.
So we need to know about immigration. We need to know about how solving money problems. We need to know how to solve the economic deficit.
You don't really need to know about solving immigration, but you do need to understand that schools are businesses and they have objectives that they need to accomplish. And so if you're going to come at a school with a pitch to launch a new initiative, how does that initiative help the school accomplish its strategic plan? For those of you that are a little bit more entrepreneurial and business minded, I want you to go and Google the strategic plan for the school that you're studying at right now. You can find it on their website. Find their strategic plan and tell me what's in there that you can align to esports. Because if you can do that, you're already like 10 steps ahead of the competition.
That's phase 1 of our feasibility studies. Strategic pillars.
I believe that.
And then we go from there. And yeah, a lot of them are actually changing or have changed over the last year, to specifically that. How do we engage regional, domestic initiatives, community building within? But yeah, know what a P&L is.
Yes.
Know how to read it.
Yeah.
EBITDA, all this stuff. Make sure, like, it's a business, learning business, and other aspects of a specific business will help people long term anyway. And look, that brings us back to our first conversation about entrepreneurs. Like,
Right.
that's what it is. When a student wants to host an event on campus, they would come to me and be like, I've got this great idea. I want to host a X event. This many people are going to come. I'm like, are they? First off, are they going to come? Number 2 is, let's pretend I have to rent this space out for you. This is how much it's going to cost. Are you going to be able to pay for the staff that are there? Are you going to be able to pay for the food that you might need to bring in, the power, the security, all of the pieces? And they're like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. So understanding all that, and then multiply that by a school of however many students, 4,500, 10,000, 30,000. Think about the microscope that's going to be under each of those segments. And if esports is one of those, you want to build a however many $1 million facility with 30 staff or 30 student staff and whatever, that take that dollar, and it's yearly too. It's not just like that 1 year. We're going to do this, and then we got to pay for all of the things that are going on. The lights that are on in the office right now, the school's paying for it. So we got to make sure that the esports line generates enough to keep that light on above Shadi's head and the temperature that he wants to have set on his thermostat.
my thermostat right there. Yeah.
We kind of touched on this point a little bit now and off panel, but like, when it comes to, and I know this is like a little bit out of scope, but like when it comes to revenue streams inside of those programs, or like even revenue streams that like students are like trying to create with those events, like what would you say are some of the key, what would you say are some of the key ways to get that revenue flowing so that a program can exist, or so that like an event can happen? Like where would you look to try? Is it like grants? Is it just simply like something like enrollment? Is it charging like student body a fee? Where would you go about finding that?
If it's a student event, I would say obviously we were a lot more lax on what students were doing. Like it was part of, we would talk to the program and see if they can get support from the program, a sponsorship per se, to, you know, put their name on it and on the broadcast and that stuff. But I would go back to some boot camps that we hosted for professional teams on campus, where we would consider that an event. There was a fee for the schools or the teams to come into the facility. We would book a space for them. We'd have the students running, you know, making sure the PCs were working properly, supporting with food delivery into the space, you know, running it like an event. Obviously, sponsorship opportunities for other larger events. Broadcast production, even though, you know, audiences are small on most esports production on the collegiate side, definitely a lot smaller. We're not looking at hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of viewers, but seeing how we can grow that up. I mean, the revenue side of things for the events is tough, especially if you're not able to, let's use Rocket League or Fortnite, for example. You're not allowed to charge an entry fee for a tournament, or a venue fee in some cases. Some schools don't even have an ability to charge on campus, which I've seen, which is insane. But it is definitely difficult to generate revenue. But the ones who are able to and are going to continue to do it successfully, they're obviously the ones that are going to thrive and be the case to continue to build this. Maybe Shadi's got more experience with this as of recently, with some of the things, but it's still it's not going to happen on year one. You've got to build a proof of concept before, you know, the money actually starts flowing in. Year one, year two of operations is generally going to be a loss, if you're not including student fees into it, which most events, the student fees aren't covering an operation for an event, whether it's external or even sometimes internal.
So yeah, I don't know if I necessarily have like more experience. I just have a slightly different perspective. I think everything that Chris just said is 100% true. I don't want to take anything away from that, but I do think that when we're talking about the revenue question, part of that is, again, if you bring it back to the strategic plan, it's understanding what your institution wants to accomplish and then how you can prove value. It's not always about proving dollars, it's about proving value. So for example, if your school, and this is true for just about every Canadian two-year college right now, it has a goal to increase domestic student enrollment. Even if your program's not making money, if you can prove student retention or student recruitment or kind of hit some of those metrics, that's a win, right? So some schools actually do count student recruitment towards their revenue line, and others don't. And again, it really depends on the strategic plan and how their finance policies are in place. But let's bring this down to like kind of like a more simple, practical level for my club presidents, my club managers out there. What does that look like for you? Because sometimes getting enrollment data is challenging and oftentimes not always accessible to you. If you can prove, okay, you ran an event for $100, right? Let's say you spent $100 on, you know, you got like prizing and you did some very basic marketing, and you had, you know, 60 people show up to your event. And let's say you did that 5 times in a semester. Okay. And let's say of those 60 people, 40 of them were repeat customers. So you had a 66% retention rate the entire way through. These are now students whose lives you've positively impacted through esports on a repeat basis, that are regularly attending your events and therefore are regularly attending campus events because of something that you've built, right? So we're talking about $500, which a lot of schools can pay for out of their student union fees, or can raise through a very simple sponsorship, or honestly bootstrap it a little bit. Like I bought prizes when I ran the Laurier Club. I brought prizes. I remember I got a Mercy Pop figure from EB Games that I brought with me to every event, and I paid for it with my. Do you have one there too? Oh,
I
that's
have
awesome.
a Mercy Pop figure. Yeah,
I bought it
I
for
might
$20 from EB
also have
Games.
one.
and I walked around with it for a full year, and that was what I used as part of my promo. So like I think sometimes you do have to put your money where your mouth is a little bit, whether that's through the effort you're putting in or genuinely, contributing a little bit to it. And I think one of the this is maybe a controversial take. One of the challenges with the Canadian ecosystem is because we have schools like St. Clair that are doing so well, it's almost kind of convinced people that the standard is that you should get paid to play esports and not the inverse, right? And I think you have to understand really what the value proposition is of a varsity esports program before you can claim that your school deserves to have one too,
Yeah.
right? And so the significant majority of school, like the significant majority of students, let's look at traditional sports, for example. You have a couple school students. Let's say you've got a basketball team and your basketball team has 16 guys. You've got a guys and a girls team. So let's say it's 32, 35 students that are getting paid to play basketball on your campus. How many thousands of students are paying athletic and rec fees to use the gym? So 35 students are getting paid, and then 35,000 are paying to play basketball, right? But sometimes we look at esports and say, no, I should get paid because I'm a student and I hit Radiant last week, and so I should get paid, right? It's you have to actually take the time to think about where you stand in the general ecosystem of it all and what you're doing to contribute to the growth. What's the ROI, the return on investment that you're demonstrating back to the institution?
I'll
That
take a
makes
$10,000 scholarship.
that makes a lot of sense. I will also take a $10,000 scholarship,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
But no,
The
that
crazy
makes
thing is
a
that
lot of sense.
in the collegiate side, college specific, not university, is there's a
Mhm.
cap on traditional sports scholarship. I think in Ontario, I think it might be $3,500 a student. I don't know if it's per year, per term, or whatever it is, but there's no, and this is this is a different topic for another day, is the governance in esports and what league you're playing for, how much you can offer, if they need to be varsity, if they're club, if they're not either, what they can be online, offline, in person.
What are you doing after this? Chris and I can go for another hour. Yeah,
An
what's
hour,
next?
2 hours, whatever it is. But there's also those kinds of things that need to balance and be sorted out. Um, and that's a conversation I'm not ever going to be involved with for maybe a long time.
Mhm.
But it's really difficult to have that specific thing as a student coming to me when I was a manager and being like, well, I deserve a $10,000 scholarship or a full ride scholarship for your school because I'm really good at Valorant. So that's great. I've run a pro team where guys have come to me and said the same thing. I've got 150,000, $250,000, 250,000 followers on social media. I'm going to sell you a ton of merch and you're going to actually make money. And it's the same thing. Like, it's not going to happen. Student side, completely different, obviously, but like I haven't seen the ability for a specific single student to come in and be like, I'm going to bring, if you told me you're going to bring in 5 friends to be students at the school, I think I'm more likely to give you a scholarship, but prove it.
Mhm.
It's like an affiliate code.
So
You
I'm
gotta
gonna
sign up when you go to university with your affiliate
first of all,
code.
I know of colleges that are doing that, and I think it's really weird. So don't do
What,
that.
affiliate codes?
Yeah, the affiliate codes.
Don't do
The
it.
second thing, I actually do know there are examples of students that have had that impact on recruitment, even in Canada. And so I do think that there are some I'll push back on Chris's comments slightly that there are some exceptions to that rule, but generally speaking, it's not one student that's going to be the difference maker. It's generally a full team or a full program that where you're slowly going to start to see that impact on your branding and your visibility. And at that point, maybe there's a justification or an argument for varsity esports, right? But being good at a video game alone is not enough to get paid. Like, for example, the student that I'm thinking about in my mind is a student that not only was incredibly good at the game that they played, they were also a very prominent content creator. They'd gone viral on TikTok. And so when they got picked up by the school, they had an immediate brand impact on that
Mhm.
school. That's dollars, right? Because those eyeballs translate to prospective recruits, right? Or warm leads for a school to then recruit. That translates to tuition revenue. So now this, whatever $4,000 scholarship you've thrown at this one student has translated into $35,000 in tuition. That's a good business investment, right?
I like it.
So
Yeah.
you have to think about
Modern marketing.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's influencer marketing. That's what it is to be a varsity esports team, by the way. You're basically just a TikToker. You're an influencer. Like, and I don't mean that in like a disparaging way, but
Mhm.
that's the reason you get paid. That's the reason you exist, is because you are influencing other students to come to that school. But if you don't approach it that way, if you're not repping the brand, if you're not active on social media, if you're not out in the community, like if you're not actually being a brand ambassador, then you're just getting paid to play video games. And that doesn't help anyone except for you, I guess.
That
Helps you a little bit.
seems even true in like the real esports industry when you look at like
Yeah.
a Cloud9 or something. All the players, like especially now, I feel like there's a big market on like who the player is and how they're bringing money to that team. We got about 5 minutes left in this panel. I want to ask one thing really quick when it comes to like the future of like esports education. We've talked on it a lot, but like when it comes to things like ASEL, A5, I know ASEL handles, I believe, some under 15 and under 18 teams. And we were talking a little bit earlier, we touched on like K to 12, bringing esports into like the high school area. What do you guys what are you guys hoping that looks like in the future? And is there anything, any other like final notes you guys want to touch on about the future of esports education where you're hoping it heads?
For sure. Yeah, you put me and Chris on a panel and we just talk about collegiate because there's just so much
And
crap to
And
business.
talk about.
that's
in
the
business.
majority of our viewership, so that's totally fair.
Yeah, so I'll quickly introduce, because I mentioned ASL briefly at the beginning of the conversation. So junior high, high school, interscholastic competition, so on and so forth. And we talked about this idea of a pipeline, and that was honestly the justification we used to get off the ground. I think what I'm hoping for is that part of, and especially again looking at kind of again the zeitgeist in Canada around domestic student recruitment, I think where scholastic esports plays a really big part is it starts warming students up to the idea of esports in post-secondary education before they ever write their first application, right? And so, I have students that play in my league that have received scholarship offers from schools in the States. And if I can take that, actually, something I'm working on right now is taking that data and presenting it to our local post-secondaries and being like, look at these students that are moving countries because they don't have an opportunity to continue this in their own backyard, in their own neighborhood. I think that's really one of the values that scholastic esports poses for the post-secondary space, is building that talent funnel, and that interest that then can be leveraged into domestic student recruitment, on top of all the other amazing things that scholastic esports provides, right? The social emotional learning, the extracurricular engagement, the career prospect development. Like I could do a whole hour just on ASEL and all the great awesome things that we're doing there. But if we're talking about kind of that pathway into college, it really, recruitment is that number one piece. Is you're generating interest for students to, one, expose them to the idea of actually studying at post-secondary, because depending on where you live in the country, that's not like an automatic thing. Like, I'm from Ontario originally. I get the sense that, I don't know where you're from, Romeo, if
I'm Ontario as well. I'm from
you're
Sudbury,
Ontario as well.
so
Chris is
I live
Ontario.
in Mississauga now.
I think for a lot of people in Ontario, the idea of going to university or going to college when you graduate is really automatic. But since moving out west, I've learned that's not necessarily the same in the prairies. Like, Manitoba has a different perspective, Saskatchewan has a different perspective, Alberta, and then you go to the Maritimes as well. And so scholastic esports not only introduces kids to the idea of continuing their education, which is a really valuable and important thing, but also continuing their involvement in esports post graduation. And so that's ultimately some of the goals with the league, is that if we're successful, we hope that makes post-secondary spaces successful as well.
Awesome. I just want to ask, is there any final things you guys want to say? This has been a brilliant panel. This has been so interesting for me personally. I've been like sucked into this conversation to such a great end. But is there any final things you guys want to say to our viewers or to the people who are going to watch the VOD back afterwards about anything in this conversation, anything about esports, anything about A5, ASEL, anything you guys want to, or even just plug where people can find you and learn more from you after this panel?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn mostly these days, and if you want to see some more hot takes on Twitter, it will always be Twitter. For me, kind of just to quickly answer the last question, is my goal, and I think all of our goals of people who are working in this industry, it goes back to that keyword. Two keywords is sustainability and pipeline. How can we make those two things happen long term? So we're not having a conversation, next year on this panel saying, another X school is closing. We want to say another X5, however many are opening, or 10 new K-12 spaces are opening up, and that's how it's helping that pipeline in Alberta and Ontario and Quebec or wherever. So yeah, to pitch myself again at the end here is, if anyone wants to, chat, have a real conversation about my thoughts from the business side, or my experiences through the collegiate space, my DMs are open. I hate notifications, so I respond to everything. So working through that, if you want to pitch your school on esports, there's two great people in this panel that can hopefully help support that. We're helping with, like I said, feasibility studies and actual, what is your school going to get out of it? I can't be there to actually build the program once we do that study. I mean, I could, but it comes with time. But there's also people that we have in our networks that can help support once the go is there. Who are the right people? Because one thing we didn't touch on is ensuring that the people who are running your program, your directors, your managers, even your educators, those people have some kind of experience in the field, because there's nothing that hits less than walking into a classroom and your teacher knows nothing about esports and gaming. I've had students come to me like, I just had a class about RPGs and we're an esports program. Yes, there's a little bit of background in gaming that we need to focus on, but they want to learn about esports and what's going on in the industry and how it works and whatnot. So ensuring that your space has some kind of working professional. Again, it's really hard to come by in the Canadian sector, but there are people out there. There are people that are building, like myself, like Shadi, like other people that were mentioned on this call, that can support with those conversations. And we all want to see this industry grow. And I don't think I've ever had a conversation with anyone who's been, that's still involved in it, that has a selfish bone about doing this. It's a community. We're all trying to do this together. We want it to be successful because we want ourselves and those that we work with to have future opportunities in the space. I'm going to leave it at that. So I'll let Shadi have the floor.
Yeah. I guess I'll quickly say, mine and Chris's comments withstanding as well, don't let the doom and gloom about esports in Canada, bum you out from taking the next big risk. I think there's a bit of a narrative right now that it's really hard to do esports in Canada, or that it doesn't work in esports. And I won't contest the really hard part, but I think it's hard because it's work, just like anything else. Right. And I think as long as you're approaching it with the right authenticity and integrity, and you're being mindful of all of the things that Chris and I have talked about, aligning it with a strategic plan, being mindful of kind of the entrepreneurship and the business components associated with it, being conscious of what the ROI is for the institution, there's a lot of opportunity for growth in Canada. And with just as many programs as we see shutting down, we see new schools at the high school level getting involved. We see new college clubs popping up out of nowhere, or new grants or new initiatives. And so focus on the positive side. And yeah, I'll echo Chris's comments. If people want to stay in touch, best place to reach me is on LinkedIn. I'm on Discord as well. If you connect with me through LinkedIn, I'll generally funnel you straight to my Discord because I hate messaging people on LinkedIn. And yeah, you can Alberta Esports Championship next week, provincial championship. I've got almost 400 kids coming to Calgary for esports. So if you want to watch that, it's ASEL_esports starting Friday at 9 Mountain Time. So.
All right. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this panel. Honestly, I feel like this panel, at least on my end, it gives me so much hope for the future of esports and what that is going to look like in North America, even in like 10 years time, with people like both of you trying to make such advancements in like the collegiate level and all that. And it was just a genuinely wonderful conversation with you guys. Of course, we also have to thank our sponsors. So I'm going to go ahead and do 2 quick sponsorship reads so that CIE can stay around. Our first sponsor for this panel was BMO and BMO Next Level. To help you focus on what's important, BMO has checking and savings accounts, credit cards, and borrowing options specifically designed for students. Open a BMO student account and get up to $950 in value, including $175 cash with BMO's current student offers. Visit bmo.com/students for details. And then also we're sponsored by BMO Next Level, which is a first of its kind program dedicated to helping gamers level up in game and in real life. Run by Sean Frame, BMO's gaming relations specialist. Sean brings a commitment to helping viewers achieve their financial goals and has a passion for gaming as an active member of its community. You can learn more by typing BMO in the chat. As well, we're also sponsored by One of Zeros, which you can see them below me right now. One of Zero has supplied CIA with 6 gaming mice that make you better at what you do. Type !raffle in the chat, which we can see a ton of viewers already doing, for a chance to win one of 6 gaming mice supplied by One of Zero. Code like Maniac, design like Guru, and game like an assassin. Take pride in your setup and look good while you achieve it all. Discover your inspiration, defy definition, be One of Zero. Anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning into this industry panel. It's been an absolutely phenomenal time. Of course, we will be back afterwards at 7 p.m. Eastern or 4 p.m. Pacific with Marvel Rivals, the first group stage, the Forced Esports coming at the Canadian Intercollegiate Expedition. So stay tuned for that, and thank you all for tuning in. I believe this is also going to be going up as a VOD in the future. So if you're watching us in the future, thank you for watching. And we're out.